The dust rose like a vengeful spirit as Tallulah Vance's wagon wheels cut through the parched earth of the Texas plains. Her knuckles whitened against the reins, not from the exertion of controlling her two mares, but from the weight of desperation pressing down on her shoulders. 3 days since she'd fled from a home that no longer wanted her, carrying nothing but a carpetbag of meager possessions and the crushing knowledge that at 25 she was considered damaged goods. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself as much as to the horses. The year was 1873, and a woman alone on the frontier was as vulnerable as a newborn calf in wolf country. But Tallulah had no choice, not after what happened in Oak Ridge. The afternoon sun beat down relentlessly as she approached the town of Redemption, its weathered buildings shimmering like a mirage on the horizon. She'd heard rumors of work in this growing cattle town, perhaps as a schoolteacher or shopkeeper's assistant. Anything to keep her fed and sheltered while she pieced together what remained of her dignity. As she neared the town's edge, the right wheel of her wagon hit a deep rut, lurching violently. The wooden axle gave a sickening crack before splintering. Tallulah's body pitched forward, then sideways as the wagon tilted dangerously. "Whoa," she called, pulling hard on the reins as the wagon collapsed onto its side, sending her tumbling to the ground. Pain shot through her ankle as she landed, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out. The horses neighed nervously, straining against their harnesses. Tallulah pushed herself up, wincing at the pain in her ankle, and limped toward them, working quickly to calm and free them from the damaged wagon. "Easy now," she murmured, stroking their necks. "We're almost there." "Madam, you all right?" A deep voice called from behind her. Tallulah turned to find a man on horseback approaching, the setting sun silhouetting his broad shoulders and the unmistakable shape of a cowboy hat. As he drew closer, she could make out his features' tanned skin weathered by sun and wind, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of a summer storm. "I've had better days," she replied, attempting to sound steadier than she felt. He dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height as his boots hit the ground. "Name's Keegan Northcott, foreman at the Triple Star Ranch." He gestured toward the broken wagon. "Looks like you've got yourself in quite a predicament." "Tallulah Vance," she replied, extending her hand with as much dignity as she could muster while standing beside a collapsed wagon. "And yes, I suppose I have." He shook her hand firmly, his calloused palm rough against her skin. "Where you headed, Miss Vance? Redemption. I'm looking for work." His eyes took in her fine, if dusty, dress and her well-spoken manner. "What kind of work? Teaching, perhaps, or clerking in a shop?" She straightened her shoulders. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Northcott." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "No, I don't imagine you are." He surveyed the broken wagon again. "That axle's beyond repair. Let me help you get your belongings to town." Relief washed over her. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to trouble you." "No trouble." He unhooked her horses completely from the wagon. "We can use one as a pack horse for your things." "Can you ride the other?" Tallulah nodded, though her ankle throbbed painfully. Keegan noticed her wince as she took a step. "You're hurt." "It's nothing serious, just twisted my ankle in the fall." Without warning, he knelt down beside her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her ankle. Tallulah hesitated, then nodded. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he examined her ankle through her boot. "Doesn't seem broken, but you shouldn't put weight on it." He stood again. "You'll ride my horse. He's steadier. I'll lead him and the others." Before she could protest, he'd efficiently transferred her belongings to one of her horses and was helping her mount his own stallion. His hands at her waist were strong and sure, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. "Thank you," she said softly, settling into the saddle. "Just doing what anyone would," he replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would stop for a woman alone on the frontier. As they made their way toward town, the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and crimson. Tallulah stole glances at the man walking beside the horse, leading them all toward Redemption with quiet confidence. "So what brings you out this way alone, Miss Vance?" he asked after they'd traveled in silence for a while. Tallulah tensed. "I'm seeking a fresh start." "Most people who come out here are. And you, Mr. Northcott? Is that what brought you to Redemption?" He nodded. Came out after the war, didn't have much waiting for me back east. You fought in the war between the states, Union cavalry, he confirmed, but that's long past now. They crested a small rise, and the full view of redemption spread before them, a modest main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the others, and scattered houses surrounding the center. Lanterns were being lit in windows as dusk settled over the town. Not much to look at, Keegan said, but it's growing. Cattle drives stop here on their way north, and the railroad's supposed to reach us by next year. It looks perfect to me, Tallulah replied honestly. Perfect because it wasn't Oak Ridge, where everyone knew her story and judged her for it. As they entered the town, Keegan led them directly to a 2-story building with a sign reading Widow Patterson's boarding house. Best place for a respectable lady to stay, he explained. Martha Patterson runs a tight ship, but she's fair. He helped her down from the horse, and Tallulah tried not to wince as her injured ankle took her weight. Before she could thank him again, the door to the boarding house opened, and a stout woman with iron gray hair stepped out. Keegan Northcott, what trouble are you bringing to my doorstep now? The woman called, though her tone held more affection than annoyance. Evening, Mrs. Patterson. I've brought you a new boarder if you've got room. Miss Tallulah Vance here had a wagon accident just outside of town. Mrs. Patterson's sharp eyes softened as they took in Tallulah's disheveled appearance and obvious fatigue. Oh, you poor dear, come inside at once. My things, Tallulah began. I'll bring them in, Keegan assured her, and I'll see to your horses. That's very kind, but I can't impose, it's no imposition. His eyes met hers, and something in their depths made her breath catch. Welcome to redemption, Miss Vance. Before she could respond, Mrs. Patterson had taken her arm and was guiding her inside, already talking about hot baths and supper waiting in the kitchen. Tallulah glanced back over her shoulder to see Keegan already unloading her meager belongings, his strong hands handling her carpet bag with unexpected care. Perhaps, she thought, this town might indeed live up to its name. The next morning, Tallulah awoke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains and the distant sounds of a town coming to life. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, but then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She was in redemption, in Widow Patterson's boarding house, hundreds of miles from the whispers and pitying glances of Oak Ridge. Her ankle still ached, but the swelling had subsided thanks to Mrs. Patterson's herbal poultice. Tallulah dressed carefully in one of her 3 remaining dresses, a sensible blue cotton that had seen better days, but was still presentable. She pinned her chestnut hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Dark circles shadowed her hazel eyes, and her normally rosy complexion was pale with fatigue. But at least she looked respectable. Respectable was currency for a woman alone. When she made her way downstairs, she found Mrs. Patterson in the dining room, serving breakfast to 3 other boarders, 2 traveling salesmen, and an elderly woman who was introduced as the former schoolteacher, Miss Winters. Good morning, dear, Mrs. Patterson greeted her warmly. You're just in time for hot cakes. Thank you, Tallulah replied, taking a seat. Mrs. Patterson, I was wondering if you might know of any employment opportunities in town. I need to start earning my keep. The older woman placed a plate of hot cakes in front of her. As a matter of fact, Miss Winters here was just saying she's looking to retire fully from teaching. The town council has been scrambling to find a replacement. Miss Winters peered at Tallulah through thick spectacles. Do you have any teaching experience, young lady? 3 years at a girls' academy in St. Louis, and I tutored before that. Subjects: literature, history, basic mathematics, and some Latin. Miss Winters nodded approvingly. The children here need a firm but fair hand. Many of them are ranchers' children who only attend school when they're not needed for work. I understand, Tallulah said. I grew up on a farm myself. I'll arrange a meeting with Mayor Simmons today, Miss Winters declared, standing up from the table with surprising energy for her years. If he approves, you could start next week. Tallulah felt a flutter of hope. Thank you, Miss Winters, I would be most grateful. After breakfast, Tallulah decided to explore the town despite her tender ankle. She needed to familiarize herself with redemption if it was to become her home. The main street was busier than it had appeared the previous evening, with shopkeepers sweeping their porches and ranchers' wives gathering supplies. She passed the general store, the sheriff's office, a small bank, and what appeared to be a doctor's residence and office combined. At the far end stood a saloon called the Lucky Spur, which she gave a wide berth. As she was admiring the simple white church with its neat cemetery, a familiar voice called her name. "Miss Vance, didn't expect to see you up and about so soon." She turned to find Keegan Northcott approaching, leading his horse. In the daylight, she could better appreciate his appearance, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair that curled slightly where it met his collar. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about his face with its strong jaw and those remarkable gray eyes. "Mr. Northcott, I was just exploring the town." "How's the ankle?" he asked, his gaze dropping briefly to her boot. "Much improved, thank you." "And thank you again for your assistance yesterday. I'm not sure what I would have done if you hadn't happened by." He shrugged off her gratitude. "I heard you might be our new school teacher." Tallulah raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." "Small town," he said with a slight smile. "You'll get used to it. If I get the position, I'm meeting with the mayor later today." "You will," he said with certainty. "Mayor Simmons is desperate since Miss Winters announced her retirement. Besides, you seem—" He paused, searching for the right word, "capable." Coming from him, it felt like high praise. "Thank you. I should be getting back to prepare for the meeting." "I'll walk with you," he offered, falling into step beside her. "I need to pick up some supplies at the general store anyway." As they walked, Tallulah was acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople. A woman alone with a cowboy was enough to raise eyebrows, even if they were simply walking down a public street in broad daylight. "People are staring," she murmured. "They're just curious about the new arrival," Keegan replied. "Like I said, small town, they'll get used to you." "I hope so. A school teacher needs to maintain a certain reputation." "Is that why you left your last position, reputation concerns?" The question was casual, but Tallulah froze mid-step. That's rather personal, Mr. Northcott." He immediately looked contrite. "You're right, I apologize, not my business." They walked in awkward silence for a moment before Tallulah relented slightly. "I left because I needed a change." Sometimes the past becomes too heavy to carry in familiar surroundings. He nodded slowly. "I understand that better than most." They had reached the boarding house. Tallulah turned to him, uncertain of the protocol. Was she supposed to invite him in for tea? That seemed too forward for a woman in her position. "Well, thank you for escorting me," she said formally. "Miss Vance," he said, suddenly serious. "Redemption's a good place for new beginnings." "Whatever you're running from," he held up a hand when she started to protest, "and we're all running from something out here, it won't follow you. Not if you don't let it." She swallowed hard. "That's a comforting thought, Mr. Northcott." "Keegan," he corrected. "Everyone calls me Keegan." "Tallulah," she offered in return, the informality feeling both strange and right on her tongue. He tipped his hat. "Good luck with the mayor, Tallulah." As she watched him walk away, Tallulah felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. Perhaps it was simply gratitude for his kindness, or perhaps it was the way he'd said her name like it was something worth savoring. Either way, she pushed the feeling aside. She had a job interview to prepare for and a new life to build. There was no room for distractions, especially not in the form of a handsome cowboy with perceptive gray eyes. Mayor Simmons was a portly man with bushy sideburns and an air of self-importance that seemed at odds with the modest size of redemption. He conducted Tallulah's interview in his office above the bank, with Miss Winters present as both advocate and examiner. After an hour of questions about her educational philosophy, teaching methods and background, carefully edited to avoid mention of her brief, disastrous marriage, the mayor declared himself satisfied. "We'll offer you a 6-month contract to start," he announced. "Salary is $40 a month. With room and board included, you can continue at Widow Patterson's. School is in session Monday through Friday, 8 till 3, with additional Saturday mornings for children who can't attend regularly due to ranch work." "That's very generous," Tallulah said, relief flooding through her. $40 a month would allow her to save and perhaps eventually find her own small place. Independence, that was what she craved most. Miss Winters will show you the schoolhouse tomorrow and help you prepare for next week, the mayor continued. I must warn you, some of our students can be challenging, ranch boys with more interest in roping cattle than reading books. I'm not afraid of a challenge, Mayor Simmons. As they left the mayor's office, Miss Winters linked her arm through Tallulah's. I think you'll do nicely, my dear. The children need someone young enough to understand them but firm enough to command respect. I hope I can live up to your expectations. Just be honest with them, and they'll respect you for it. The older woman patted her arm. Now, let's celebrate your new position with tea at my cottage. I have 20 years' worth of lesson plans you might find useful. By the time Tallulah returned to the boarding house that evening, her head was spinning with information about Redemption's 37 school-aged children, their various family dynamics, and which students needed extra attention. But beneath the overwhelm was a steady current of gratitude. She had a job, a place to stay, and the beginnings of a fresh start. She was halfway up the stairs to her room when Mrs. Patterson called her name. Miss Vance, there's something for you. Tallulah turned back to find the landlady holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. It was delivered while you were out, Mrs. Patterson explained, handing it to her with a curious look. Tallulah examined the package. There was no note attached, no indication of who had sent it. Carefully, she unwrapped the paper to find a small tin of salve with a handwritten label. For sprains and bruises, apply twice daily. Who brought this? She asked. Mrs. Patterson's eyes twinkled. Mr. Northcott dropped it by, said it was from the Triple Stars Ranch doctor. Seems our foreman is taking quite an interest in your welfare. Tallulah felt her cheeks warm. He's simply being neighborly, I'm sure. Hum, Mrs. Patterson hummed, clearly unconvinced. Neighborly indeed. In the 3 years Keegan Northcott has been foreman at the Triple Star, I've never known him to play errand boy for the ranch doctor. Not even when Mayor Simmons twisted his ankle last summer. I'm sure you're reading too much into it, Tallulah insisted, tucking the tin into her pocket. He probably felt responsible since he found me after my accident. If you say so, dear. The older woman's smile was knowing. By the way, congratulations on securing the teaching position. Word's already spread through town. Thank you, I start next week. That night, as Tallulah applied the salve to her ankle, she tried not to think about Keegan Northcott or the fact that he'd gone out of his way to bring her the medicine. Men had shown her kindness before, and it had always come with expectations she could no longer fulfill. She would be polite if their paths crossed again, but nothing more. Tallulah Vance had learned her lesson about hoping for more than what life had dealt her. This time, she would be content with independence and the quiet dignity of making her own way. The Redemption schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple one-room building with a bell tower and freshly whitewashed walls. Inside, rows of wooden desks faced a larger teacher's desk and blackboard. Bookshelves lined one wall, though the collection was modest, mostly primers, a few worn copies of classics, and several Bibles. It's not much compared to your academy in St. Louis, Miss Winters said apologetically as she showed Tallulah around, but we make do with what we have. It's perfect, Tallulah assured her, already envisioning how she would arrange the space. A school is made by its teacher and students, not its trappings. The older woman beamed. Exactly right. Now let me introduce you to the students' families. We'll start with those in town, then visit the closest ranches tomorrow. The day passed in a blur of introductions to the blacksmith's 4 children, the general store owner's twins, the doctor's studious daughter, and a dozen others. Most parents were welcoming, eager to meet the new teacher who would shape their children's futures. By late afternoon, Tallulah's feet ached, and her voice was hoarse from repeating her credentials and educational philosophy. When Miss Winters suggested they stop for the day, she gratefully agreed. Tomorrow we'll visit the ranches, Miss Winters said as they parted ways. The Triple Star is furthest out, but they have 5 school-age children among the ranch hands' families, and of course there's little Sarah. Sarah, Tallulah inquired, Sarah Northcott, Keegan's niece. Sweet child, but she's had a difficult time since losing her parents. Lives with her uncle at the ranch now. Tallulah absorbed this new information with surprise. I didn't realize Mr. Northcott had family here, just Sarah. His brother and sister-in-law died of fever 2 years ago. Keegan took her in without hesitation, though raising a young girl alone can't be easy for a man in his position. This glimpse into Keegan's personal life shifted Tallulah's perception of him. Not just a taciturn cowboy, but a man who had stepped up to care for his orphaned niece. It spoke of character and responsibility qualities she had learned to value. The next morning, Miss Winters arrived at the boarding house in a small buggy. "Ranch day," she announced cheerfully. "Better to ride than walk, especially with that ankle of yours." They visited 3 ranches before midday, meeting children of various ages and dispositions. Most seemed pleasant enough, though a few of the older boys eyed Tallulah with skepticism, clearly wondering if this refined-looking woman could handle their mischief. As they approached the Triple Star Ranch in the early afternoon, Tallulah felt an inexplicable nervousness. She smoothed her skirts and checked that her hair was still neatly pinned. "No need for anxiety," Miss Winters assured her, misinterpreting her fidgeting. "The ranch hand's children are well-behaved, and Sarah is an angel." The Triple Star was impressive, a sprawling main house, several bunkhouses, stables, and corrals spread across the rolling landscape. Men on horseback moved herds in the distance, and the sounds of activity filled the air. As their buggy pulled up to the main house, a small figure burst through the front door. A girl of about 8 with dark braids and a calico dress ran toward them, waving excitedly. "Miss Winters, did you bring the new teacher?" she called. "Indeed I did," the older woman replied, helping Tallulah down from the buggy. "Sarah, this is Miss Vance. She'll be taking over the school next week." Sarah skidded to a stop in front of them, suddenly shy. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Vance." She executed a small curtsy that was so earnest it made Tallulah smile. "I'm very pleased to meet you too, Sarah. I understand you live here with your uncle," the girl nodded. "Uncle Keegan's inside. He said to bring you both in for lemonade when you arrived." She led them up to the porch, chattering about her favorite subjects, reading and geography, and how her uncle was teaching her to ride her own pony. Tallulah found herself charmed by the child's enthusiasm. The main house was surprisingly comfortable inside, simply furnished, but clean and well-maintained. In the large kitchen, they found Keegan in conversation with a woman who appeared to be the housekeeper. He looked up as they entered, and Tallulah was struck again by the intensity of his gray eyes. "Miss Winters, Miss Vance," he greeted them, his gaze lingering on Tallulah. "Welcome to the Triple Star." "Thank you for having us," Tallulah replied, striving for a professional tone. "How's the ankle?" he asked. "Much better, thanks to that salve. Thank you for bringing it by." He nodded, then gestured to the table where a pitcher of lemonade and glasses were set out. "Please sit. Mrs. Hodges makes the best lemonade in the county." The housekeeper, a stout woman with kind eyes, shooed Sarah to wash her hands before joining them. As they settled around the table, Tallulah was acutely aware of Keegan's presence across from her. "So you'll be starting next week?" he asked as Mrs. Hodges poured the lemonade. "Yes. I'm looking forward to meeting all the students." "Sarah hasn't stopped talking about it since we heard you got the position," he said with a fond glance at his niece, who was now returning to the kitchen. "She's partial to books, takes after her mother that way." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his brother's wife, and Tallulah felt a pang of empathy. Loss was something she understood all too well. "Uncle Keegan reads to me every night," Sarah announced as she climbed onto a chair, "even when he's tired from working all day." Tallulah couldn't help but smile at the image of this rugged cowboy reading bedtime stories. "What are you reading now?" "Treasure Island," Sarah replied. "It has pirates." "An excellent choice," Tallulah approved. "Perhaps we'll read some adventure stories in class as well." While Miss Winters discussed the school schedule with Keegan, Tallulah engaged Sarah in conversation about her favorite books and subjects. The girl was bright and eager to learn, with a curiosity that reminded Tallulah why she'd become a teacher in the first place. After they'd finished their lemonade, Keegan suggested, "Sarah, why don't you show Miss Vance your pony while I discuss a few things with Miss Winters?" The girl leapt up enthusiastically. "Can I, Miss Vance? Buttercup is the prettiest pony in Texas." "I'd love to meet Buttercup," Tallulah agreed, following Sarah outside. The small golden pony was indeed beautiful, with a creamy mane and gentle eyes. Sarah proudly demonstrated how she could bridle and saddle her mount all by myself, except Uncle Keegan has to tighten the girth because I'm not strong enough yet. As Sarah chattered, Tallulah became aware of Keegan watching them from the porch. When she glanced his way, he didn't look away but nodded slightly, as if approving of what he saw. A short while later, Miss Winters emerged from the house. "Time we moved on, Miss Vance. We still have the Pearson Ranch to visit before sundown." Tallulah said goodbye to Sarah, promising to see her at school on Monday. As she climbed back into the buggy, Keegan approached. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Northcott," she said formally. "Keegan," he reminded her quietly. "And you're welcome anytime, Miss Vance." Sarah could use a woman's influence in her life. He hesitated, then added, "Truth be told, I'm not always sure I'm doing right by her. A girl needs certain guidance a man can't provide." The vulnerability in his admission touched Tallulah. "From what I can see, you're doing an admirable job." "She's a wonderful child." "She is," he agreed, his expression softening. "Better than I deserve, probably." "I doubt that," Tallulah said before she could stop herself. Their eyes met for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who had shouldered responsibilities not of their choosing. "Safe travels," he finally said, stepping back from the buggy. As they drove away, Miss Winters gave Tallulah a sidelong glance. "Interesting man, Keegan Northcott. Came here 3 years ago from nowhere, worked his way up from ranch hand to foreman in less than a year. Owner of the Triple Star swears he's the best cattleman in 3 counties, he seems." "Dedicated," Tallulah replied carefully. "Indeed, especially to that niece of his. Turned down a better-paying position at her ranch in Colorado because he thought moving would be too hard on Sarah after losing her parents." Miss Winters clicked her tongue. "That's the kind of man who's rare in these parts, one who puts family before fortune." Tallulah nodded but said nothing more. She didn't want to encourage gossip, especially when her own thoughts about Keegan Northcott were already more confused than they should be. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect whether for the children's walk or ride to the schoolhouse. Tallulah had spent the weekend preparing lessons and memorizing names, determined to make a good first impression. She arrived early, arranging books and writing a welcome message on the blackboard. By 8 o'clock, children began filtering in, first the town kids, then those from nearby farms, and finally the ranchers' children on ponies and in wagons. Sarah Northcott arrived with 2 other Triple Star children, driven by one of the ranch hands. She bounded into the classroom with a wide smile and a shiny red apple for her new teacher. "Uncle Keegan said teachers like apples," she explained, placing it carefully on Tallulah's desk. "Thank you, Sarah. That was very thoughtful of both of you." By 8:30, all 34 students were present, ranging in age from 6 to 16. Tallulah rang the school bell to officially begin the day and took her place at the front of the room. "Good morning," she began, surveying the curious faces before her. "I'm Miss Vance, and I'm honored to be your new teacher. Before we begin our lessons, I'd like to learn a little about each of you." She went around the room, asking each child to state their name, age, and one thing they hoped to learn this year. Most responded eagerly, though a few of the older boys mumbled reluctantly. When she reached a lanky youth of about 15 at the back, he slouched in his seat. "Tom Pearson, 15. And I ain't got no use for schooling. Pa says I'm gonna run our ranch someday, and that don't require book learning." Tallulah met his challenging gaze steadily. "On the contrary, Mr. Pearson. Running a successful ranch requires mathematics for managing finances, reading for contracts and market reports, geography to understand weather patterns and cattle routes, and history to learn from those who succeeded or failed before you." The boy blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct response. "Besides," she continued, "I believe your father attended this very school and went on to build one of the most prosperous ranches in the county. Would you say he values education?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, madam." Then perhaps you might consider that his success and his education are not unrelated. She smiled to soften the rebuke. Now, what would you like to learn this year? After a moment's consideration, he admitted, maybe the mathematics for finances, like you said. Excellent choice. We'll start today. The morning passed quickly as Tallulah assessed the students' various levels and divided them into appropriate groups. The younger children worked on basic reading and numbers, while the older ones tackled more advanced material. At noon, they broke for lunch, eating from pails and sacks brought from home. Tallulah sat on the schoolhouse steps, enjoying her own modest meal while keeping an eye on the children playing in the yard. Sarah approached shyly, holding a paper-wrapped package. Uncle Keegan packed extra biscuits and ham. He said you might want some. Tallulah hesitated, aware that accepting food from a single man might raise eyebrows, but the gesture seemed innocent enough, especially coming through Sarah. That was very thoughtful. Please thank him for me. The biscuits were fresh, and the ham thickly sliced far better than the simple bread and cheese she'd packed for herself. As she ate, she wondered about Keegan's consideration. Was it merely neighborly kindness or something more? The afternoon session was devoted to a history lesson about the region, followed by a geography exercise using the school's worn map. By the time the final bell rang at 3 o'clock, Tallulah was exhausted but satisfied. Most of the children had been attentive and respectful, even Tom Pearson after their initial exchange. As the students filed out, Sarah lingered. "Miss Vance, Uncle Keegan said to tell you he'll be picking me up today instead of sending a ranch hand." "I see," Tallulah replied, ignoring the flutter in her stomach at this news. "Well, I'll walk out with you then." Outside, several parents were already collecting their younger children. Among them, unmistakable on his tall black gelding, was Keegan. He tipped his hat as Tallulah emerged from the schoolhouse. "Miss Vance, how was the first day?" "Successful, I think. Sarah was a model student." The girl beamed at this praise as Keegan swung down from his horse to lift her up into the saddle. "Glad to hear it. She was excited all weekend." "Thank you for the lunch," Tallulah said. "It was very kind. Least I could do after all the preparation you've put in for these children." His gaze was warm as it rested on her face. "You look like you were born to be in that schoolroom." The compliment caught her off guard. "Thank you. I've always loved teaching." "Uncle Keegan," Sarah interrupted, "can Miss Vance come to Sunday dinner sometime? Mrs. Hodges makes the best roast chicken." Tallulah opened her mouth to politely decline, but Keegan spoke first. "That's a fine idea if Miss Vance would like to join us." He looked at Tallulah expectantly. Put on the spot, she hesitated. Dining alone with a single man would be inappropriate, but with Sarah and presumably Mrs. Hodges present, it could be acceptable. And truthfully, the prospect of a proper home-cooked meal was appealing after a week of boarding house fare. "Perhaps this Sunday," she found herself saying. "We'll send the buggy for you after church," Keegan replied, a pleased expression crossing his face. "Around 1 o'clock. "That would be lovely, thank you." As she watched them ride away, Sarah chattering animatedly from her perch in front of Keegan, Tallulah wondered if she had made a mistake. Becoming too friendly with a student's guardian could lead to complications, especially when that guardian was an unmarried man who made her heart beat faster with just a look. But it was only dinner, she reasoned. A simple kindness extended to the new schoolteacher, nothing more. Sunday arrived with Tallulah fretting over her limited wardrobe. She had only one dress suitable for social calls, a forest green poplin with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs. It was 3 years out of fashion, but it was the best she could do. After church, where she had been formally introduced to the congregation by Reverend Collins, she returned to the boarding house to change. Mrs. Patterson watched her preparations with barely concealed interest. Sunday dinner at the Triple Star, quite an honor. "The Northcott table isn't open to just anyone. It's merely a professional courtesy," Tallulah insisted. "Mr. Northcott wants to discuss his niece's education." "Of course he does," Mrs. Patterson agreed with a knowing smile. Precisely at 1 o'clock, a well-maintained buggy pulled up outside. To Tallulah's surprise, Keegan himself was driving rather than a ranch hand. He wore a clean white shirt under a black vest, with his customary hat and boots polished to a shine. The overall effect was striking. "Good afternoon, Miss Vance," he greeted her, jumping down to help her into the buggy. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, settling onto the seat beside him. The proximity was unsettling in the confined space of the buggy. She was acutely aware of his size and strength, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. As they drove, Keegan pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area. He was more talkative than she'd previously seen him, and Tallulah found herself genuinely interested in his knowledge of the land. "How long have you been at the Triple Star?" she asked. "Going on 4 years now." "Came west after the war, worked a few ranches before landing here. Owner's a fair man who values hard work, so I stayed on. And then your niece came to live with you," his expression sobered. "Yes, my brother John and his wife settled in Colorado. Good people." When the fever took them, there wasn't anyone else for Sarah. He glanced at her. "It wasn't what I expected, raising a child on my own, but she's the best thing that ever happened to me." The simple honesty of his statement touched Tallulah deeply. "She's fortunate to have you." "I don't know about that," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "I'm making it up as I go. Ranch work doesn't exactly prepare a man for raising a young lady." "You seem to be doing admirably well," Tallulah assured him. "Sarah is bright, kind, and clearly adored." They arrived at the ranch to find Sarah waiting impatiently on the porch. The girl had donned her Sunday best, a blue gingham dress with a ribbon in her hair, and was practically bouncing with excitement. "Miss Vance, you came," she exclaimed, as if she doubted it until this moment. "Of course I did," Tallulah replied, accepting the child's enthusiastic hug. "I've been looking forward to it all week." Inside, the dining room table was set with the ranch's best china and a vase of wildflowers at the center. Mrs. Hodges had outdone herself roast chicken as promised, along with potatoes, fresh bread, creamed corn, and apple pie cooling on the sideboard. "It smells wonderful," Tallulah said sincerely. "Mrs. Hodges believes in feeding people properly," Keegan explained as he held out a chair for her. "Says a ranch runs on its stomachs as much as its horses." The meal was the most enjoyable Tallulah had experienced in months. Sarah regaled them with tales of her pony's exploits. Keegan shared amusing stories of cattle drives and even misses. Hodges joined in with local gossip when she wasn't bustling back and forth from the kitchen. Tallulah found herself laughing freely for the first time since. She couldn't remember when. The weight she'd been carrying seemed lighter in this warm kitchen with these genuine people. After dessert, Sarah asked if she could show Miss Vance her collection of treasures in her room. Keegan nodded his permission, and the two females disappeared upstairs. Sarah's room was a charming space with a patchwork quilt on the bed and shelves filled with books, rocks, pressed flowers, and various trinkets. "Uncle Keegan built the shelves special for my treasures," she explained proudly. Among the girls' possessions, Tallulah noticed a daguerreotype in a silver frame, a handsome couple with Sarah between them, perhaps 5 years old then. The man had Keegan's strong jawline but friendlier eyes. "Your parents?" Tallulah asked gently. Sarah nodded, her expression momentarily somber. "That was right before they got sick. Uncle Keegan says I have Mama's smile and Papa's stubborn chin. They were lovely people, I'm sure. I miss them," the girl said matter-of-factly. "But Uncle Keegan says it's okay to be happy even when you miss someone. He says they'd want that." Tallulah swallowed past the sudden tightness in her throat. "Your uncle is a wise man." When they returned downstairs, they found Keegan on the porch, gazing out at the land. He turned as they approached, his expression softening at the sight of them together. "Would you ladies care for a walk?" "It's a fine afternoon." Sarah enthusiastically agreed, and Tallulah found herself between uncle and niece as they strolled around the ranch. The girl skipped ahead occasionally to examine interesting rocks or flowers, giving the adults moments of conversation. "She's taken to you," Keegan observed as they watched Sarah chasing a butterfly. "She doesn't warm up to many people so quickly." "Children have good instincts," Tallulah replied, "and she's easy to care for." "Yes, she is." He hesitated, then added, "It's good for her to have a woman to look up to. Mrs. Hodges is a fine housekeeper, but she's not one for nurturing or teaching." Tallulah didn't know how to respond to this. Was he suggesting she could fill some role in Sarah's life beyond that of teacher? The thought was both appealing and alarming. "Mr. Northcott, Keegan," he corrected gently. "At least when we're not in town." "Keegan," she conceded. "I'm happy to be Sarah's teacher, and I'm flattered that she's taken a liking to me, but I don't want to overstep my bounds or create misunderstandings." He turned to face her, his expression serious. What misunderstandings would those be? Tallulah looked away, unable to meet his intent gaze. "I'm new to redemption. My position requires a certain propriety, and I wouldn't want anyone to think." She trailed off, unsure how to express her concerns without sounding presumptuous. "To think that there might be something between us beyond a professional relationship," he finished for her. "Yes," she admitted. "Not that you've given any indication I'm not suggesting," she stopped, flustered by her own awkwardness. To her surprise, Keegan smiled. "Tallulah," he said, her name sounding different in his deep voice, "I respect your concern for propriety, but I should be honest with you. I did invite you here today to discuss Sarah's education, but also because I enjoy your company." "Is that so terrible?" The direct admission caught her off guard. "No, not terrible, just complicated." "Life is complicated," he agreed. "Doesn't mean we can't find simple pleasures in it. Like good food and pleasant conversation." Before she could respond, Sarah came running back, effectively ending the private exchange. But Keegan's words stayed with Tallulah throughout the remainder of their walk and the drive back to town. He was right, of course. Life was complicated. And hers had been particularly so these past years. Perhaps she was overthinking his kindness, seeing intentions that weren't there. Or perhaps she was deliberately blind to what was developing between them because she feared where it might lead and what truths she would eventually have to reveal. As summer turned to autumn, Tallulah settled into the rhythm of life in redemption. Her days were filled with teaching, her evenings with grading papers and preparing lessons. She took her meals at the boarding house and attended church on Sundays, gradually becoming a respected fixture in the small community. Sarah Northcott continued to flourish under her tutelage, often staying after school to help clean the blackboard or organize books. Keegan made a point of picking the girl up himself at least once a week, each time exchanging pleasant conversation with Tallulah. These brief interactions became something she looked forward to: his insights about the land, his dry humor, his evident pride in his niece. They maintained a careful propriety in public, never giving the townspeople reason to gossip. But there were moments: a lingering glance, a brush of hands as he helped her down from the schoolhouse steps, a shared smile at something Sarah said that suggested deeper currents beneath their friendly exchanges. On a crisp October afternoon, Tallulah was straightening the schoolroom after the children had left when she heard a horse approaching. Looking out the window, she saw Keegan dismounting, though it wasn't his usual day to collect Sarah. "Afternoon," he greeted as he entered, removing his hat. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. Sarah's already gone home with the Miller children today." "I know. I came to see you, actually." He shifted his weight slightly, a rare show of uncertainty from the usually confident man. "There's a harvest dance in town this Saturday. I wondered if you might allow me to escort you." Tallulah's heart skipped a beat. A public social event was different from a private dinner. It would be an unmistakable statement to the town about his interest in her. "That's very kind," she said carefully, "but I'm not sure it would be appropriate. The school board might not approve of my attending a social function with a student's guardian." "I spoke with Mayor Simmons yesterday," Keegan replied. "Asked him directly if there would be any objection to my escorting the schoolteacher to the dance. He said, and I quote, 'It's about time Northcott showed interest in something besides cattle.'" A smile tugged at Tallulah's lips despite her reservations. "You actually asked the mayor for permission to court me. I believe in doing things properly." He took a step closer. "Tallulah, I've respected your desire to establish yourself here without complications, but it's been 3 months and my feelings haven't changed. If anything, they've grown stronger." Her pulse quickened at his directness. "Keegan, I'm flattered, truly, but there are things about me, about my past, that you don't know." "Then tell me," he said simply. "Whatever it is, it can't be as bad as you think." She turned away, running her fingers along the edge of her desk. How could she explain? The words seemed to stick in her throat. I was married, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. In St. Louis, his name was Edward Vance. I figured as much, Keegan replied, surprising her. Most women teaching out here are widows, she shook her head. I'm not a widow, we're divorced. The word hung in the air between them. Divorce was scandalous, a mark of failure and shame, especially for a woman. He was cruel, she continued, unable to look at him. Not with his fists, but with his words and actions. He married me for my small inheritance, which he quickly squandered. When he realized there would be no more money forthcoming, he became different. Keegan remained silent, allowing her to continue at her own pace. After 2 years of marriage, I still hadn't conceived a child. Edward became convinced the fault was mine. He consulted doctors, forced me to try various treatments and tonics. When nothing worked, his resentment grew. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to continue. One night, after too much whiskey, he told me that no man wants a childless wife, that I was useless to him. The next day, I found him with our neighbor's wife in our bed. Her voice shook slightly with the remembered humiliation. I filed for divorce on grounds of adultery. His family was scandalized, tried to convince me to withdraw the petition. When I refused, they spread rumors that I was barren and frigid, that I had driven Edward to seek comfort elsewhere. Finally, she turned to face Keegan, expecting to see disgust or pity in his expression. Instead, she found only quiet anger, not directed at her, but on her behalf. The divorce was granted 6 months ago, she finished. I couldn't stay in St. Louis after that, so I came west looking for somewhere I could start fresh, where no one knew my shame. Keegan shook his head slowly. Shame. Tallulah, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Your husband was a fool who couldn't recognize the treasure he had. His unwavering gaze held hers. As for being childless, if that's even true, and not just a convenient excuse for his behavior, plenty of couples take years to conceive. Some never do. It doesn't make a woman less valuable. Many would disagree, she said softly. Then I'm no man but yours, he replied, the words so unexpected that Tallulah gasped. If being a man means valuing a woman only for her ability to bear children, then I want no part of that definition. He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. I care for you, Tallulah Vance. For your mind, your spirit, your kindness to my niece, your dedication to your students. Whether you can have children or not doesn't change that. Tears pricked at her eyes. You can't know how much that means to hear. So, he said, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands, will you allow me to escort you to the dance? Let me show this town and you exactly how much I value your company. Looking into his earnest gray eyes, Tallulah felt something unlock inside her, a chamber of her heart that had been sealed shut by pain and disappointment. Slowly, carefully, she allowed herself to hope again. Yes, she whispered, I would be honored. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the plains, gradual, then brilliant. I'll call for you at 6 on Saturday. Before releasing her hands, he raised one to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, respectful, yet it sent a jolt of warmth through her entire body. Until Saturday, then, he said, settling his hat back on his head. Tallulah watched him go, her hands still tingling from his touch, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The harvest dance was held in the town hall, a spacious building normally used for civic meetings and church socials. For the occasion, it had been transformed with autumn decorations, dried corn husks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every available surface. Tallulah wore her best dress, the forest green poplin, freshly pressed and embellished with a lace collar borrowed from Mrs. Patterson. Her chestnut hair was arranged in a more elaborate style than her usual schoolteacher knot, with soft curls framing her face. When Keegan arrived to escort her, his appreciative gaze made her blush. He himself cut a fine figure in a dark suit she'd never seen before, though he still wore his customary boots. You look beautiful, he said simply. Thank you, you're quite handsome yourself, Mrs. Patterson, watching from the parlor doorway, smiled approvingly. Don't keep her out too late, Mr. Northcott. Even on a Saturday, a schoolteacher needs her rest. Yes, madam, he replied with good humor. I'll have her back at a respectable hour. As they walked to the town hall, Tallulah was conscious of curious glances from townspeople they passed. By the time they reached the dance, word of their arrival together would have spread throughout Redemption. Having second thoughts, Keegan asked quietly, noticing her tension. "No," she replied, surprising herself with her certainty. "Just adjusting to being the subject of attention. We could give them something real to talk about," he suggested with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Keegan Northcott, don't you dare scandalize this town any further," she scolded, though she couldn't help smiling. "Wouldn't dream of it," he assured her, though his hand at the small of her back was perhaps a touch more possessive than strictly proper. Inside the hall, the festivities were already underway. A small band played lively tunes while couples danced and others gathered around tables laden with food and drink. Sarah, who had come earlier with Mrs. Hodges, spotted them immediately and rushed over. "Uncle Keegan, Miss Vance." "You came together." Her delight was unrestrained. "Does this mean you're courting now? Billy Miller said his ma said you probably were, but I told him I'd know if my own uncle was courting someone." Keegan cleared his throat, a hint of color appearing above his beard. "Sarah, remember our discussion about private matters?" The girl looked chagrined. "Sorry, but are you?" she whispered hopefully. Tallulah exchanged a glance with Keegan, who nodded slightly. "Yes, Sarah," she said gently. "Your uncle has asked to court me and I've agreed." Sarah's whoop of joy drew several amused looks from nearby dancers. "I knew it. I just knew you two would be perfect together. Can I tell Billy Miller now?" "I think the whole town will know soon enough without your help," Keegan said dryly. "Now, why don't you run along and enjoy yourself with your friends? Miss Vance and I would like to dance." After Sarah bounded away, Keegan turned to Tallulah with an apologetic smile. "I hope that wasn't too forward, but she would have pestered us all evening otherwise." "It's fine," Tallulah assured him. "She's a child and she's excited." "She's not the only one excited about this development," he said, his voice lowering as he offered his arm. "May I have this dance, Miss Vance?" The band was playing a waltz, and Tallulah's heart fluttered as Keegan led her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as they began to move in time with the music. Despite his rugged exterior, he was a graceful dancer, guiding her confidently through the steps. "Where did you learn to waltz?" she asked, pleasantly surprised. "My mother insisted all her sons learn, said even cowboys should know how to behave in polite society." His expression turned nostalgic. "She was from Boston originally. Never quite adjusted to life on our family's small ranch in Missouri, but she made sure we had some refinement." "She raised a gentleman," Tallulah observed. "She tried," he agreed with a smile, "though I'm sure she'd be scandalized by how far I've strayed from her lessons." As they danced, Tallulah was aware of curious glances and whispered conversations around them. Occasionally, someone would nod approvingly or smile in their direction. It seemed their courtship met with general approval, a relief given her position in the community. When the waltz ended, Mayor Simmons approached with his wife. "Northcott, Miss Vance, splendid to see you both enjoying the festivities." He winked conspiratorially. "I told Keegan here that a school teacher needs some social life beyond books and children." "You're very progressive, Mayor," Tallulah replied diplomatically. "Practical, my dear, practical. Young people should pair off and build families, makes for a stable community." He patted his ample stomach. "Speaking of which, have you tried Mrs. Miller's apple pie, best in the county?" After the mayor moved on, Keegan leaned close to Tallulah's ear. "I apologize for him. Subtlety isn't his strong suit." "It's fine," she assured him. "I'm just glad he approves. It makes things easier professionally." They spent the next hour alternating between dancing and socializing. Tallulah was introduced to several ranchers and their wives whom she hadn't yet met, all of whom seemed genuinely pleased to make her acquaintance. Keegan remained attentive throughout, never leaving her side for long. During a break in the dancing, while Keegan fetched them punch, Sarah sidled up to Tallulah. "Miss Vance," the girl began hesitantly. "If you and Uncle Keegan get married someday, would that make you my aunt?" The question caught Tallulah off guard. "Well, yes, I suppose it would." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I'd like that. I've never had an aunt before. Mama didn't have any sisters and Papa only had Uncle Keegan." "Sarah, your uncle and I have only just begun courting," Tallulah cautioned. Marriage is a long way off if it happens at all, but you like him, don't you? The girl pressed. And he likes you a whole lot, I can tell. Yes, I do like him, Tallulah admitted, very much. Then it'll happen, Sarah declared with a child's certainty. Uncle Keegan always gets what he sets his mind to. He says that's the secret to ranching, knowing what you want and working hard for it. Tallulah couldn't help but smile at the girl's confidence. Well, some things are more complicated than ranching. Not to Uncle Keegan, Sarah replied with a knowing look beyond her years. He says love is the simplest thing there is it's people who make it complicated. Before Tallulah could respond to this surprising philosophy, Keegan returned with their drinks. Sarah gave Tallulah a conspiratorial wink before skipping off to join her friends. What was that about? Keegan asked, handing Tallulah a cup of punch. Your niece seems to have some definite ideas about our future, she replied with amusement. Ah, he looked slightly embarrassed. She's been dropping hints since you first came to dinner. I've tried to explain that these things take time, but she has your determination, Tallulah finished for him, something like that. He gazed at her over the rim of his cup, his eyes warm. Does it bother you, her presumption, I mean? Tallulah considered the question seriously. No, she finally said. It's sweet, actually. And flattering that she's so enthusiastic about the possibility. Relief crossed his face. Good, because I'd hate for her to scare you off before I've had the chance to properly win your heart. Is that your intention, to win my heart? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Yes, he answered without hesitation. Completely and irrevocably, the simple directness of his response left her momentarily speechless. In her experience, men couched their intentions in flowery language or vague promises. Keegan's honesty was refreshing and terrifying in its clarity. You look alarmed, he observed. Too much, too soon. Perhaps a little, she admitted. I'm not used to such straightforwardness. I believe in speaking plainly, he said. Life's too short for games and misunderstandings. He set down his empty cup and offered his hand. Dance with me again. The band had started a lively reel, and soon they were caught up in the energetic steps, laughing as they circled and spun. In that moment, with her hand in his and joy bubbling up inside her, Tallulah allowed herself to fully embrace the possibility that had been growing since their first meeting, that in this unlikely place, with this unexpected man, she might find the happiness she'd thought forever beyond her reach. As autumn deepened into winter, Tallulah and Keegan's courtship became a familiar sight in redemption. They attended church together on Sundays, often with Sarah between them, and Tallulah was a regular guest for Sunday dinners at the Triple Star. During the week, Keegan would sometimes ride into town on business and happen to finish his errands just as school was letting out, allowing him to walk Tallulah back to the boarding house. Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed. Mrs. Patterson took to making knowing comments about wedding bells in the spring, while Mayor Simmons congratulated himself on facilitating the match whenever the opportunity arose. For Tallulah, the courtship was a revelation. Where Edward had been calculating and self-centered, Keegan was genuine and considerate. He listened when she spoke, valued her opinions, and never made her feel lesser for being a woman. When she mentioned books she missed from her teaching days in St. Louis, he arranged for them to be ordered through the general store. When she expressed interest in learning to ride better, he found her a gentle mare from the Triple Star's stock and patiently taught her on weekend afternoons. Most importantly, he never once mentioned children or heirs or her womanly duties. Instead, he spoke of partnership, of building a life together based on mutual respect and affection. As Christmas approached, the schoolhouse became a center of activity. Tallulah organized a holiday pageant, with the children performing the nativity story and reciting poetry for their families. Sarah was cast as an angel, a role she took very seriously, practicing her lines every evening with Keegan's help. 2 days before the pageant, Tallulah was staying late at the schoolhouse, sewing costumes and arranging the modest decorations they could afford. Outside, snow had begun to fall, a rare occurrence in this part of Texas, especially so early in the season. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the door open until a gust of cold air made her look up. Keegan stood in the doorway, snowflakes melting on his shoulders and hat. "Keegan, I wasn't expecting you." "Saw the light still burning as I was passing through town," he explained, removing his hat. "It's getting bad out there. Thought I should escort you home before the roads become impassable." She glanced out the window, surprised to see how heavily the snow was falling now. "I didn't realize." "Thank you for thinking of me. Always," he said simply, moving to help her gather the scattered costume pieces. Sarah's beside herself with excitement about this pageant, been prancing around the house with a halo made of wire and paper. Tallulah smiled at the image. "She'll be wonderful. All the children will." "You've done something special here," Keegan observed, gesturing around the schoolroom with its paper chains and evergreen boughs. "Made this place more than just a building where children learn their letters. Made it a community." His praise warmed her. "It's important for them to have traditions, celebrations, especially out here where life can be so demanding. You understand the West better than most who come from back east," he said. "Seen too many fail because they couldn't adapt, couldn't find joy in the hardship." "I had good teachers," she replied, thinking of her own adjustment to frontier life. "People who showed kindness to a stranger." Keegan's expression softened. "Speaking of kindness, I have something for you." He reached into his coat and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "An early Christmas gift." "Keegan, you shouldn't have." "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Open it." With slightly trembling fingers, Tallulah untied the string and unwrapped the paper. Inside was a small velvet box. Her heart began to pound as she lifted the lid. It wasn't a ring, as part of her had feared and hoped, but a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a book. When she carefully opened it, she found it was a locket, containing a tiny portrait of Sarah on one side. The other side was empty. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Sarah helped me choose it," Keegan said. "She insisted on having her picture inside, said the other half was for you to decide could be a picture of me someday or," he hesitated, "someone else important to you." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to her eyes. "I'll treasure it always, thank you." He helped her fasten the locket around her neck, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you," he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Something I've been considering for a while now." Tallulah's pulse quickened. "Yes. I've put in an offer on the old Miller place," he said. "The property that borders the eastern edge of the Triple Star." This wasn't what she had expected. "Oh, are you expanding the ranch?" "Not exactly." He looked slightly nervous now, unusual for him. "The house there is solid, needs some work, but the foundation and structure are good. It's a proper home, not too big but comfortable, has a nice view of the creek and good water rights." "It sounds lovely," she said, still not understanding why he was telling her this. "I'm buying it for us," he finally explained. "For our future, if you'll have me." Tallulah's breath caught. "Keegan, I'm not proposing. Not yet," he clarified quickly. "I know it's too soon, and I want to do that properly when the time is right, but I wanted you to know that I'm planning for a future with you, Tallulah, that my intentions are serious and honorable." She was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was saying. This wasn't just courtship or fleeting affection, this was a man making concrete plans for a shared life. "I don't expect an answer now," he continued. "Just wanted you to know where my heart stands." Finding her voice at last, Tallulah stepped closer to him. "My heart stands with yours," she said softly. "I can't pretend otherwise." The joy that spread across his face was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. He reached for her hands, holding them between his own. "May I kiss you, Tallulah Vance?" he asked, his voice husky. "Yes," she whispered. He leaned down, and their lips met in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened as months of restrained emotion found release. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, while her hands moved to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath his coat. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Keegan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I've wanted to do that since the day I found you with your broken wagon," he admitted. "I'm glad you waited," she replied with a smile. "Though perhaps not this long," he laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet schoolroom. "I'll make up for lost time." Outside, the snow continued to fall, coating redemption in a blanket of white. But inside, wrapped in Keegan's arms with his promise of a future bright between them, Tallulah felt only warmth and hope and the certainty that she had finally found where she belonged. The Christmas pageant was a triumph. Every seat in the schoolhouse was filled, with latecomers standing along the walls to watch the children perform. Sarah's angelic appearance and clear voice earned proud smiles from Keegan, who sat in the front row beside Tallulah's empty chair. As the teacher, Tallulah remained mostly backstage, prompting forgotten lines and adjusting crooked halos. But during the final carol, she joined the children at the front, leading the audience in Silent Night as snow fell gently outside the windows. The sight of her there radiant in a simple blue dress, the silver locket gleaming at her throat, surrounded by the children she had taught with such care, struck Keegan with almost physical force. In that moment, watching her sing with such joy and purpose, he knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with this woman. After the performance, as parents congratulated their children and enjoyed the simple refreshments provided, Keegan made his way to Tallulah's side. Without caring who might see, he took her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "That was beautiful," he said. "You should be proud." "The children did all the work," she demurred. "They had an excellent teacher," he countered, his eyes warm with admiration. Sarah bounded up to them then, still in her angel costume. "Did you see me, Uncle Keegan? Did I do good?" "You were the finest angel I've ever seen," he assured her, lifting her into his arms despite her growing size. "Your parents would have been so proud." The girl beamed at this praise, then turned to Tallulah. "Miss Vance, are you coming to Christmas dinner at the ranch, Mrs. Hodges is making a goose and 3 kinds of pie." Tallulah glanced at Keegan, who nodded encouragingly. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she told Sarah, "and you'll spend the whole day. Uncle Keegan got you a special present that he won't let me see." "Sarah," Keegan warned, though his expression remained indulgent. "What did we say about surprises?" The child looked chagrined. "That they're only surprises if you don't tell about them first." "Sorry," Tallulah laughed. "It's all right. And yes, I'll spend the day if your uncle doesn't mind." "Mind?" Keegan raised an eyebrow. "Having you with us would make it the best Christmas in years." The warmth in his voice made her blush. "Then it's settled." Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, the recent snow still blanketing the ground in crystalline white. Keegan arrived at the boarding house in the morning, driving a sleigh he'd borrowed from a neighboring ranch specifically for the occasion. "This is magnificent," Tallulah exclaimed as he helped her into the fur-lined seat. "I haven't ridden in a sleigh since I was a girl in Missouri." "Thought you might appreciate it," he said, settling beside her and flicking the reins. "It's not often we get enough snow for this." The journey to the Triple Star was magical, gliding across the snow-covered landscape, the sleigh bells jingling merrily, Keegan's solid presence beside her. Tallulah found herself laughing with pure joy as they sped along, her cheeks pink from the cold and her heart light with happiness. At the ranch, Sarah was waiting impatiently, bouncing on her toes at the window. She flew out the door as they approached, barely giving the sleigh time to stop before launching herself at Tallulah. "Merry Christmas, Miss Vance. Come see the tree Uncle Keegan and I decorated." Inside, the ranch house had been transformed. Evergreen boughs adorned the mantelpiece, red ribbons hung from doorways, and in the corner of the main room stood a small pine tree decorated with paper stars, strings of berries, and a few precious glass ornaments that Sarah explained had belonged to her mother. The day passed in a blur of warmth and laughter. They exchanged gifts. Sarah received books and a new winter coat from Keegan and a set of watercolor paints from Tallulah. Keegan opened his gifts from Sarah, a hand-knitted scarf, and Tallulah, a fine leather-bound journal for ranch accounts, expressing genuine delight with both. Tallulah's gift from Sarah was a carefully crafted bookmark with pressed wildflowers, "So you'll remember Texas summers when you're reading in winter," the girl explained. From Keegan, she received a small, heavy package that he insisted she open last. When everyone else's gifts had been unwrapped, he handed it to her with an unexpectedly nervous expression. "This is something I've been holding onto for a while," he explained. Wasn't sure when the right time would be, but Christmas seemed fitting. Tallulah unwrapped the package to find an ornate wooden box. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a ring, a delicate gold band set with a modest diamond flanked by two smaller sapphires. Her breath caught as she looked up at Keegan, who had moved to kneel before her chair. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "My father gave it to her when they decided to leave Boston and make a life together in the West. It represents courage and new beginnings, just like you." He took her hand, his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "Tallulah Vance, I know we've only known each other a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, your strength, your kindness, your heart. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Tallulah's eyes. Despite the hints and discussions of their future, the actual proposal caught her by surprise, not that it was happening, but the depth of emotion she felt at this moment. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Keegan, I would be honored to be your wife." Sarah's squeal of delight broke the solemnity of the moment as she flung herself at both of them, creating a tangled embrace that dissolved into laughter. When they disentangled, Keegan slipped the ring onto Tallulah's finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her. "Now you can be in the other half of my locket," Sarah declared, pointing to Tallulah's necklace. "Indeed she can," Keegan agreed, his eyes never leaving Tallulah's face. "Where she belongs." Later, after a magnificent Christmas dinner, and while Sarah was occupied with her new paints, Keegan and Tallulah stole a moment alone on the porch. Despite the cold, they stood close together, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed at the snow-covered landscape. "Are you sure, Tallulah?" he asked quietly. "About marrying me? I know your first marriage was nothing like this," she interrupted, turning to face him. "Edward married me for what he thought I could give him. You," she placed a hand against his cheek, "you want me for who I am." He covered her hand with his own. "I do, exactly as you are. Even knowing I might never be able to give you children," the question that had haunted her for years finally spoken aloud. "Even then," he affirmed without hesitation, "we already have Sarah, and if God blesses us with more children someday, that's wonderful. If not, you are more than enough for me." She searched his face, finding only sincerity in his gray eyes. "I love you, Keegan Northcott, and I love you, soon-to-be Mrs. Northcott." He bent to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and certainty. Against his lips, she whispered, "I never thought I would find you when I came to redemption." "Maybe that's why they call it redemption," he suggested with a smile. "It's where lost souls find what they need most." And as the winter stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Tallulah knew he was right. She had come to this town broken and afraid, running from her past. Instead, she had found a future brighter than she could have imagined, with a man who valued her completely, a child who already loved her, and a community that had embraced her. The wedding took place on the first day of spring, when wildflowers were beginning to dot the plains around Redemption. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, held in the white-steepled church, and officiated by Reverend Collins. Tallulah wore a new dress of ivory, silk, a gift from the women of Redemption, who had pooled their resources and talents to create a gown worthy of their beloved schoolteacher. Sarah served as her only attendant, beaming with pride in her new blue dress as she carried a small bouquet of early bluebonnets and daisies. Keegan waited at the altar, more nervous than he'd ever been on any cattle drive or during his time in the war. But when the church doors opened and Tallulah appeared, radiant in her wedding gown with Mayor Simmons escorting her in place of the father long gone, all nervousness vanished. There was only certainty and joy. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Collins began, his voice carrying through the packed church. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Keegan James Northcott and Tallulah Grace Vance in holy matrimony." The service was simple but moving. They exchanged traditional vows, both voices clear and unwavering as they promised to love, honor, and cherish each other for the rest of their days. When Keegan slipped the gold band onto Tallulah's finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Collins declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Their first kiss as a married couple was met with enthusiastic applause from the congregation. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Tallulah felt a sense of completion she had never known before. The celebration continued at the town hall, transformed once again, this time with spring flowers and white ribbons. There was dancing and feasting, speeches and toasts, laughter and a few happy tears. Sarah danced with every willing partner, proudly introducing herself as Sarah Northcott, the new daughter of the bride and groom. As evening approached, Keegan found Tallulah in conversation with Mrs. Patterson and Miss Winters. "Ready to see our home, Mrs. Northcott?" he asked, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. "Our home," she repeated, savoring the words. "Yes, I'm ready." They said their goodbyes, accepting congratulations and well wishes from the townspeople who had become their extended family. Sarah would stay with Mrs. Hodges at the main ranch house for a few days, giving the newlyweds time alone in their new home, the renovated Miller place that Keegan had purchased months ago with this day in mind. As they drove away from town in a buggy decorated with flowers and ribbons by the schoolchildren, Tallulah looked back at the gathered well-wishers. "I never expected this," she said softly. "When I arrived here with nothing but a broken wagon and broken dreams, I never imagined finding such happiness." Keegan took her hand, raising it to his lips. "You deserve every bit of it and more." Their new home was everything Keegan had promised: a solid 2-story house with a wide porch and a view of the creek that bordered their property. Inside, she discovered he had been working secretly for months, repairing, painting, and furnishing their home with care and attention to detail. There were bookshelves filled with volumes she had mentioned loving, curtains in her favorite shade of blue, and a kitchen stocked with everything a home needed. "When did you find time for all this?" she asked in amazement. "Evenings, weekends," he replied with a shrug. "The ranch hands helped. Even Sarah pitched in, though I made her promise not to tell you." In the master bedroom, a beautiful quilt covered the large 4-poster bed, a wedding gift from the women of Redemption, each square sewn by a different hand as a symbol of the community's embrace of their union. As night fell, they stood on their porch, arms around each other, gazing at the stars appearing in the vast Texas sky. "Are you happy, Tallulah?" Keegan asked, his voice low in her ear. She turned in his embrace to face him, her expression serene in the gathering dusk. "Happier than I ever believed possible. You've given me everything I thought was lost to me: love, respect, a family, a home. And you've given me the same," he replied. "Before you came to Redemption, I was just existing, working, caring for Sarah, getting through each day. Now I'm living, truly living, with purpose and joy." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch infinitely tender. "I meant what I said that day at the schoolhouse. No man wants a childless wife. Then I'm no man, but yours completely, in all ways that matter." "And I am yours," she whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Now and always." As the kiss deepened and they moved back toward the door of their new home, toward their shared future, Tallulah felt the last shadows of her past finally fade away. Here, in this man's arms, in this house, in this town called Redemption, she had found not just a second chance but a first true love, one built on acceptance, respect, and the kind of deep understanding that comes when two souls recognize in each other exactly what they need. And that, she knew with absolute certainty, was worth more than all the conventional definitions of what made a family complete. With Keegan and Sarah, she was whole. Whatever the future might bring, whether children of their own or simply the life they built together, it would be enough. More than enough, it would be everything. 2 years later, on another spring day much like their wedding day, Keegan and Tallulah sat on the porch of their home, watching Sarah practice roping with her new calf, a birthday present for her 11th year. The girl had grown tall and confident, thriving under the care of her uncle and his wife, whom she now called Aunt Tallulah with easy affection. "She'll be running the ranch herself one day," Keegan observed with pride. "I have no doubt," Tallulah agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "She has your determination." Life had settled into a rhythm of deep contentment for the Northcott family. Tallulah continued teaching at the Redemption School, her position now permanent after the town board had unanimously voted to extend her contract indefinitely. Keegan had been made partner at the Triple Star Ranch, with an eye toward eventually taking over when the aging owner retired. Their home had become a gathering place for friends and neighbors, a warm, welcoming haven where Sarah's friends came to play, where Tallulah hosted monthly meetings of the newly formed Ladies' Reading Circle, and where Keegan and his fellow ranchers sometimes discussed business over coffee and Mrs. Hodges's famous apple pie. "Do you ever regret it?" Tallulah asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Marrying me, knowing what you knew?" Keegan turned to her, surprised by the question after 2 years of marriage. "Regret? What on earth would I regret?" She hesitated. "We've been married 2 years now and still no child. Some might say a great many foolish things that aren't worth listening to," he interrupted gently but firmly. "Tallulah, do I look like a man with regrets?" She studied his face, the lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled, the strong jaw now familiar beneath her fingertips, the steadfast gray eyes that had never looked at her with anything but love and respect. "No," she admitted. "You don't. Good, because I have none." He took her hand, running his thumb over the gold band he'd placed there 2 years ago. "Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive. We have a beautiful home, a thriving ranch, a wonderful niece who thinks the sun rises and sets on her Aunt Tallulah, and a community that respects and values us both." He leaned closer, his voice lowering. "And I have a wife who loves me completely, who understands the land and its demands, who challenges my thinking and broadens my horizons, who makes me laugh and think and feel in ways I never knew possible." Tallulah's eyes misted at his words. "I feel the same way about you, you know. Every day I wake up grateful for this life we've built together." "Then that's what matters," he said simply. "The rest is in God's hands. If we're blessed with a child of our own someday, we'll welcome that joy. If not, our family is perfect as it is." As if to emphasize his point, Sarah let out a whoop of triumph as she successfully roped her calf. "Did you see that?" she called excitedly. "I did it just like you showed me, Uncle Keegan." "Well done," he called back. "Your form is getting much better." The girl beamed with pride, then went back to practicing with renewed enthusiasm. "She's right, you know," Tallulah said softly. "Our family is perfect as it is." Keegan squeezed her hand. "Exactly what I've been saying." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching Sarah with their shared pride. Then Tallulah straightened slightly, her expression turning thoughtful. "There is something I've been considering," she began. "The widow Johnson's youngest, Thomas and Mary, they lost both parents to that fever last month." Keegan nodded solemnly. The outbreak had taken 3 of Redemption's residents before the doctor managed to contain it. "Poor children. They're staying with the Millers now, aren't they?" "Temporarily," Tallulah confirmed. "But the Millers already have 5 children of their own in that small house. Mrs. Miller mentioned to me that they're looking for a more permanent situation for the little ones." Understanding dawned in Keegan's eyes. "You're thinking we might offer to take them in?" It wasn't a question, but Tallulah nodded anyway. "Thomas is 8, Sarah's age when you took her in, and Mary's just 5. They're good children, well-behaved in school. They need a home, Keegan, a family." He studied her face, seeing the compassion and hope there. "You've given this some thought." "I have," she admitted. "But I wanted to discuss it with you and Sarah before saying anything to Mrs. Miller. It would change our lives significantly." "It would," he agreed. 2 more children to feed, clothe, educate. 2 more hearts to worry about and care for." "Too much?" she asked, trying to read his expression. A slow smile spread across Keegan's face. "No, not too much at all. It's exactly the kind of change that makes a life richer." Relief and joy flooded through Tallulah. "You mean it? You'd consider taking them in?" "More than consider. If you believe this is right for our family, then I trust your judgment, and I can think of no better parents for those children than us, especially you." She leaned over to kiss him, her heart full. "I love you, Keegan Northcott, and I love you, Tallulah Northcott." He returned her kiss, then added with a grin, "Seems like we'd better start building that addition to the house sooner rather than later. 2 more bedrooms, I'm thinking. And perhaps 1 more, just in case. Tallulah suggested, a mysterious smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Keegan raised an eyebrow. Just in case. She took his hand and placed it gently against her stomach. Just in case this feeling I've had these past few weeks means what I think it might. For a moment, Keegan stared at her in stunned silence. Then, with a whoop that rivaled Sarah's earlier celebration, he swept Tallulah into his arms, lifting her from the porch swing and spinning her in a circle. "Careful," she laughed. "It's still early days and I'm not entirely certain." He set her down gently, his hands cradling her face as if she were made of the most precious porcelain. "Certain or not, it's wonderful news, but Tallulah, you know it doesn't change anything about how I feel." "Child or no child, I know," she interrupted, placing her finger against his lips. "I've never doubted your love, not for a moment. That's the greatest gift you've given me, the certainty that I am enough exactly as I am." He kissed her finger, then replaced it with his lips on hers. "Always," he murmured against her mouth, "you are everything." From the corral, Sarah called out, "Are you two being mushy again? Because I could use some help with this rope." They broke apart, laughing. "Coming, Sarah," Keegan called back. To Tallulah, he added softly, "Shall we tell her about the Johnsons? And the possible new addition?" "Let's start with the Johnsons," Tallulah suggested. "We can wait on the other news until we're more certain." Hand in hand, they walked toward the corral where Sarah waited, impatient but smiling at the sight of them together. As they reached her, Keegan put his arm around the girl's shoulders. "Sarah, your Aunt Tallulah and I have something we'd like to discuss with you. It's about making our family a bit larger." As they talked, the spring sun warm on their faces and the future stretching bright before them, Tallulah felt a deep contentment settle in her soul. From brokenness had come healing. From despair, hope. From loneliness, a family bound by love rather than merely blood. And at the center of it all was the man who had found her with a broken wagon and a broken heart, who had looked past her fears and failures to see her worth, who had declared with unwavering certainty, "Then I'm no man but yours." She was his and he was hers, and together they had created something beautiful, a love that defied convention, a family formed by choice as much as chance, and a life rich with the promise of all that was yet to come.